Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another Skwawk talk on social alley. I will apologise at the beginning of the programme because having been around some building works today, got a bit of brick dust in my throat and sound a bit hoarse. So if I start hacking and coughing, please bear with me. I am delighted this evening to welcome Game of Thrones star Miltos Yerolemou and outspoken lefty. And we'll have some fun, I think, as I did this afternoon, looking at some of his social media feeds and having a chat. And Ramona McCartney from the People's Assembly Against Austerity, who will be telling us about some events that they've got lined up. And yes, Miltos, you were one of my one of the most memorable characters, I think, from the whole series, and certainly one of my favourites. That I kept hoping you were going to come back to life because we didn't see you get killed. So I thought maybe he managed to get away, but it never quite happened. But you seem quite proud still of your involvement with that. It features in your Twitter bio, etc. And tell us first a little bit just about what your time on the series and what you thought about the final season, because I know that was a point of contention with quite a lot of people, me included. But I was very pleased that as one of my favourite characters. Your sword fighting protege was played the key role right at the end as well, and I won't say more than that in case anybody hasn't seen it yet, but yes, over to you.
Well, it's in my bio because I joined Twitter in a way because I'm an actor, and I think I joined at the same time as being cast in Game of Thrones, so that kind of went hand in hand. My new my newfound fame as a outspoken lefty, as you put it, is a new thing. So maybe I should change my my bio really soon. So maybe I might do that. But yeah, of course, I'm very proud of being part of that show. As an actor, I've spent my career doing lots of work that I'm really proud of, but I guess no one really knew that it was going to be as big a show. I mean, it's more than a TV show. It's a cultural phenomenon. And so that's always surprising. I mean, it's always surprising. No one expects that. I don't think even HBO expected that. And the notoriety and the level of engagement that leads to, as you said, an ending which split the fans quite decisively. So with great success comes great scrutiny. So I guess it was inevitable that you weren't going to please everyone. But yeah, it was controversial, the ending. For me, it was controversial. It was simply because I thought they rushed it. So as much as I didn't have a problem with exactly what happened in the show, the denouement of everyone's characters, I didn't have a problem with that. I just think the way that they told that story and the way they got there felt like it was rushed, and I think that was disappointing. I think for a lot of people, even people that are very supportive of the show. And yes, of course, being part of it was an amazing experience. It's very rare. I remember speaking to Sean Bean about it, and an actor of his caliber who has been in some enormous films and shows and is not a stranger to successful franchises. Even he said you don't get to do jobs like this very often, especially on TV. And so, when he says it, that you're doing something special.
Yeah, what a fantastic honor that must have been to do
that. Ruthless people casting aside every principle in the pursuit of power, weak and sneaky people, the do or die, and an unsatisfactory ending. But enough about Westminster. What about Game of Thrones?
I like that.
But somebody who's been, you were involved with that, and and now you look at the the UK political situation. And I know, we'll go into a bit more detail on that shortly, I think, but you're not particularly enamored of the new regime in the Labour Party and the way things are going in politics at the moment. So, having seen people behaving with no principles whatsoever in a TV show, how do you, was it a forecast of real life?
We're not alone in our dysfunctional politics in this country. I mean, you can look all over Europe that we are in the same, in the same situation where we're all fighting against this tide of reactionary opinion. Let's just put it that way, right? Where everyone, and so what ends up happening is that we have moments like we did when we elected Jeremy Corbyn as leader of our opposition. We have moments where it feels like the grassroots movement kind of is ready to respond to what is going on. I mean, that felt like it grew out of the anti-Wall Street post-crash, financial crash environment that we were living in. And, the trouble with the right is that it's very good at doing politics, and it's much more ruthless than the left, no matter what anyone will say about what the left is like, right? The radical loony left, the point is it's all projection. The right are the ones who are the ruthless ones. They're the ones who know how to do it the best. And that's why they are very good at situations like this. But yeah, there are moments of terrible depression and hopelessness, but the one thing that always keeps me going is that there are always people who are pushing against that, and we have to always remember that. And the only way that we move forward, the only people who have the policies for the future are the progressives, the people that are working, on grassroots level. So that always gives me hope.
Yes. Yeah, I mean,
it does make me less engaged in Westminster. I mean, that is the problem, and it is a problem because it's all we've got as a political system right now. Sorry, I didn't.
Yes, so I mean, I don't know. I wasn't going to say this. That wasn't what I was starting to say. But as you raise it, one of the key things going on at the moment is the Unite leadership election, which has just kicked off, and I don't know if you're following that much. But there are two kind of threads of argument going on there. And the right and softer left are pushing this idea that a union shouldn't be getting involved in Westminster politics, and then you have other candidates, one of whom I'm backing, that say that the union leader that's not is not doing their job properly if they're not trying to influence Westminster politics just as much as the workplace environment, etc., because the two things go hand in hand. So I very much agree with that. But tell us a little bit about yourself, Miltos. How do you come to have the politics that you've got, and what got you into that in the first place?
I think the great thing about having the opportunity to talk to people like you, and I've been really, I've really enjoyed talking about my politics, because as an actor we don't often do it, and I'm incredibly proud of the things that I believe in, and getting to my ripe old age and having lived through the things that I've lived through. But I was a teenager during the miners' strike. That was a hugely influential, it activated me. That's for sure. Growing up in Eastbourne also activated me. I mean, you can't get more parochial or conservative with a small and large C place to grow up in. So, but I think ultimately, even though my parents are not particularly radical, and they I think they always were saying, don't get into trouble, do not get into trouble, because of they grew up under British rule in Cyprus, and that really, I think, meant that I just had a different perspective of the place we were living in to all my peers, and that stuck with me. And like any country, we're all very insular because we only see the world through our prism, but you only have to know the experiences of people who lived under British rule to know, there is a big reason why, particularly our government at the moment, is very, very eager not to talk about the British past, because we've never been taught it. We've never been taught it. We've never been made aware of it, and they can talk about how unpatriotic it is to criticize, but the only way that we can move forward in a truly in a positive way. This is not a negative thing. And the more they make it about being unpatriotic, the less they understand really what's going on. My parents, who lived under British rule, who lived under severe British rule that really inhibited their lives, who wanted to come to the UK because they could, because obviously they were under threat because of the threat of the Turkish invasion. They are the most patriotic people that I know. They have pictures in their restaurant. Much to my chagrin, I would always kind of like criticize about it. It's like, why have you got a picture of Prince Charles and Lady Diana on the wall, and Union Jacks, and but they really, really loved being part of British culture, and this is why I get really angry when people talk about immigration like some kind of threat. Because immigrants have been the most patriotic people, because they know what they've gained by living in this country. And so it really, really breaks my heart every time I hear some right-wing tosser kind of tell them, excuse my language, tell them that they are the threat or they are the problem, because it's not true.
Are your mum and dad still around?
Yes, they retired early because of my dad's health and moved back to Cyprus, and yeah, they're in Cyprus.
Good. Yes, I was just curious what they make of your outspoken contributions on social media, etc. Because I know my dad died last year, and
I'm sorry to hear
I get told I'm too tough on people sometimes, or too harsh, and one of the favourite fallbacks of the right-wing Labour, if I put him on the spot, is, you're bullying me or something. But my old dad, he was an ex-steel worker, and he would have told me I wasn't being hard enough, probably. So
I think you're right there. I think that there's not enough people speaking out, and we have to use our voices, definitely, Steve.
This is an interesting one. You might understand better than me what this means here, Miltos. From Nicola Tudor. Tell Miltos the water dancer is here. That mean anything to you?
Yes, I know Nicola. Yeah, thanks. Hello, Nicola.
Jolly good. Go on, make fire away.
You just said something about my parents don't even have the internet. They live in a tiny village in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
I struggle to get them to even to engage with my career. So but they have always kept my feet on the ground, and I think I am blessed to have them as my parents, because I think, and Ramona, you're right about, we don't talk about it enough, especially within my profession. We are all, creative people notoriously are progressive. Let's say that, and I'm always struck that people always say to me, "Oh, it's really interesting that you are so outspoken. Don't you worry about it?" And to be honest, I've never worried about it. Maybe that's my problem. Maybe I should worry about it, but I've never, because I just don't think.
Exactly.
I don't think anything that I believe in is particularly radical. I just think it's kind of.
It's quite normal.
We are facing a future that, if we carry on down the road we're going, the only thing that's going to end up happening is that all our problems will be exacerbated, because inequality, precarious jobs, all of these things. I don't understand why people don't realize that there is a root cause to this. So,
exactly.
so anyway.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think that, well, the organization that I work for, the People's Assembly, we've always had that cultural connection as well, to make sure that music and sort of, people from the arts are upfront and speak out, because it's necessary, to use your platform. If you have a platform, use it. You're not doing anything wrong. You're saying what everybody's thinking, and if you say it, it's sort of it makes it better and bigger and louder, and people can rally around it. So I think that there's definitely something that we should be within and even the sports world, I think as well, that we have to, like Marcus Rashford has been really, really great. But I think we need more people to not be afraid of their management or their contract or whatever it is, to just say, guess what? It's shit out there and we need it to be better. And don't be afraid of that. So yeah, I think you're right in that sense of use your platform. So well done for you, to use your platform in this way.
Now, one of the current affairs aspects that we could look at today is the events in Bath with Keir Starmer's walkabout there. I don't know if you've been following what was going on, but we saw Starmer in Hartlepool the other week and looking well. I think one Twitter wag said wandering about like an untimely erection in a suit, which was quite funny. Today we've seen this peculiar kind of mix of craven weakness and Stalinism that seems to characterize the current Labour regime, in that we've seen Keir Starmer refuse to sign a letter calling on the Commons to debate the idea of having an investigation into Boris Johnson's failure to be honest, was the way that they put it, and it lies, and it would be the simpler way to say it. But even that kind of mealy bad language was a bit too much for Keir, and he refused to sign under the excuse that it wasn't a Labour initiative and therefore he didn't want to back it. On the other hand, then we've seen him go to Bath today and have one of his minders virtually wrestle a pub landlord down the landlord's own stairs in order to prevent him, speaking his mind to Keir Starmer. I mean, the landlord was voicing some odd views on the pandemic and so on, but he was claiming that he was being assaulted. And I mean, you have to say, looking at the footage, it did give that impression. So, what is it about Labour that they, or the current leadership, that he appears to be perfectly happy to be ruthless with his own people and with ordinary voters, but not stand up to the Tories?
Well, I
think
don't know
this
if
is
you're
the thing that
asking
is the most. Sorry, Rona, go.
No, go ahead. I'm not sure if you're asking this to both of us.
No.
Well, whoever feels like speaking on
No,
it.
please go ahead. I'll go on.
No. I was just going to say that speaking on behalf of the People's Assembly, I would have to say that we don't affiliate to any political party, and I wouldn't feel comfortable speaking about anything that, in a personal capacity, I feel like he's doing nothing to challenge the Tories, and it's actually quite upsetting that we are allowing this breed of Tories actually at the moment to get away with murder. They're like, what they're doing is it's the biggest daylight robbery. In fact, I think £37 billion worth of daylight robbery that they're siphoning off from the public purse into the pockets of their friends. And we've got this guy that's not really challenging it, and I think it's in a way heartbreaking for a lot of people in this country to watch this. It's like you're screaming behind a glass wall and no one can hear your voice. So I think that the Labour Party was set up to be the voice of the voiceless, the people that didn't have the time or the energy or the education to speak up for themselves. So now we find ourselves in a situation where we really need that more than ever, and it's not happening. So that's my personal capacity opinion. Yeah.
Miltos, what do you make of it?
I think that there is the most disappointing thing, and this is why I get very upset when people say that we are the ones who are causing the drama, the ones who are not supportive, the ones who are. Let's always remember how inclusive Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party was. All right, whatever people say, they weren't the ones, because they couldn't afford to kick out the Parliamentary Labour Party. For many of us, we thought that they should have been more ruthless about those MPs that were every day undermining his leadership, right? Not just us on Twitter, but those people in Parliament, right? Let's remember that. The most disappointing thing is that, of course, you have a leader that thinks that he picks his fights very, very strategically, but he doesn't at all. And we all know that how much the Blair years were infested with this kind of sleaze that we are. That's why they don't want to investigate it. You've got people like Peter Mandelson, who are now being welcomed back into the party, who were completely had to resign because of this kind of stuff, right? So of course they're not really that interested. It's not about, whether it's a Tory initiative or a Labour initiative. They know that they get crucified over it. The point is that unless you have a leadership that does something more than not nonsensical rhetoric, right? Ramona, you this whole thing about what's happened during the pandemic, you have a leader of the opposition who has allowed this government to change the narrative on the pandemic. Because the vaccine is going well, now you hear people talking not about what happened in the first year and how catastrophic it was with PPE procurement and the deaths that this country saw, but you have now people saying, well, no one else would have done any better, because there is no opposition that said we could have done this. And the most fundamental thing, as someone who's my partner is a teacher, it was very clear in the spring of last year that unless Keir Starmer was going to back the unions over what was important to do to open schools, and we're not talking about lockdown. There are countries all over the world, particularly in Southeast Asia, who have managed to deal with this pandemic without a vaccine and without lockdowns, and that is because they know what they're doing. And we absolutely decided to avoid all of that, and to be someone who is going to not just sound like the only good ideas come from the left. Jeremy Hunt actually got it right, because he looked to Asia and saw what they were doing and actually suggested that is exactly the way we should approach this pandemic, and we didn't. We ignored it. We weren't interested in it, and even Keir Starmer not backing the unions, the teachers' unions, because they had the right idea. They knew that if you go back to school, my partner works in a 1600 pupil school in central London. There is no way of doing social distancing, unless you have joint up thinking and a national strategy. You can't leave it up to schools, because some schools can't do it and they don't have the resources. And so
exactly.
This is where everything starts to go wrong. He doesn't trust the unions, and anyone who is interested in pandering to that of going, yeah, we can't trust unions.
There's also
as far as I'm concerned, he has nothing to say to the Labour movement.
I hear everything you're saying, but there's also something that we should be discussing, and that is 11 years of austerity. 11 years of austerity brought us to the position where the most vulnerable members of our communities were put at high risk when this pandemic struck. things could have been a whole lot different if there was not a lack of funding and investment and care for people. So I think that also we have to hold them to account for this, that actually they're responsible in a lot of other ways. We wouldn't have been in this situation if we had properly funded services and decent housing and decent education and decent everything, we live on this planet. Please, can we just have decent housing and food and education, please, sir? Seriously, it's not too much to ask for. If these things are neglected, it spirals into all kinds of hell, and that's what we've seen. The sort of stripping of the nation that happened over the last 11 years has left us in a position where the poorest and the most vulnerable in our society have been left hanging out to die, basically. So that's one thing that we also have to hold them to account. The other thing is, okay, so we're here now. What's going to happen going forward? How do we rectify this? And how do we protect society going forward? Obviously, we can't have the Tories in government for much longer, or it's going to get worse and worse.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I think I probably mentioned this in most shows, but it still continues to stagger me that this argument gets rolled out every week. That you'll get Keir Starmer's supporters saying, well, you can't expect him to be more popular than Boris Johnson because the public doesn't know how badly Boris Johnson's doing, because the media won't tell them. Well, I think, well, yeah, welcome to reality. But whose bloody job is it to tell the public how bad a job Boris Johnson's doing, the leader of the opposition? And
he has the pulpit. He has the pulpit.
Yeah, and they would have to listen if he made enough noise about it. Just like Jeremy Corbyn changed the argument, because we saw what happened with Labour when, Ed Miliband and co, decided that they were going to accept this ridiculous argument about household finances and the idea that, we'd overspent and we'd run out of money and all this bollocks. And, it didn't take very many months of a Labour leader being prepared to just say, actually, that's just political and it's nonsense, before suddenly the landscape on the media was having to be redrawn because he was refusing to march to their tune. Sorry for the mixed metaphors there, but and last year we saw, right from the very beginning, we saw this absolute idiocy of, when the people were brought back from, was it Japan, and on the cruise ship, and they were put into what the government and the media termed quarantine. And, this was just across the river from where I live. And I know the area where they were being kept. But, I got a call from people who lived opposite this place saying, we've got these people that are supposed to be in quarantine wandering about. They're just allowed in and out. There's no kind of restrictions. And they're not actually quarantined. They're just put somewhere and then allowed to come and go as they wish. And, but the media was telling that as as quarantine. That was a bit earlier than when Keir Starmer actually had the leadership. But, it was ever since then, we've seen the herd immunity thing. We've seen the lie about the idea that the Tories threw what Matt Hancock called a protective ring around care homes, and swearing blind that they would never send somebody who they knew was infected back into a care home. And the leading policy on the NHS website explicitly said, we will send people who we know are infected back into care homes. And expect the care homes to manage them because we want to keep NHS beds free, so that Matt Hancock could boast about having protected capacity in the NHS. And he actually did that by killing a load of, killing a load of old people.
Steve, let's also remember that there is a reason why there is this so-called British variant. And that's because we let this virus spread like I'm not going to say the word, in this country. And it is now spreading all over the rest of the world. But I've got a friend in Thailand, and they're now going through a second wave. And they got it right the first time, but they are now dealing with our variant. And that is because we let it spread, because we did nothing. And so we're, this idea that we're okay now, let's not forget that we have created this. And unless people understand how viruses work, you can't let this government off the hook. They have made it worse. It's not, no one else could have coped, This makes me so angry. And I for one, it makes my jaw drop that there are not more people in Parliament who are as angry as we are, because it's devastating. Yeah. It's devastating. We can't be complacent about what's happened.
Well, here's this in the. I'll just read this before you come in there, Ramona. But Meredith Knowles has commented there saying, "My dad died in January 21 of COVID. It's sickening to me that Keir didn't hold the government to account over the past year, and the Tories are getting away with it. Thousands dead. I mean, 100,000 and more now. And, in case anybody wants to try and claim that those are not the direct responsibility of the government and those who failed to oppose them, New Zealand's death total for the whole pandemic so far, when I checked yesterday, was 26.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you respond properly. So we'll give Boris Johnson the first 26 and not hold him accountable for that. But everything after 26 up to the 150,000 or more that it is now, that's down to bad government. That's, the people should be in the dock, not just having a public inquiry, in my opinion. Sorry, Ramona.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that it's like, it's not some sort of weird phenomenon that we have one of the highest death rates in the world. It's not. I mean, when we started out, the lack of, preparedness actually the NHS started off with 100,000 bed and vacancies and bed shortages straight away. So first of all, we were already in a bad place. But the handling of the pandemic in the early days, I mean, it is absolutely disgraceful what happened in the early days. And you're right. They did promote a herd immunity. And actually, they had a massive backlash on that. But publicly then, they backtracked, but they still carried it out. So they said one thing, but they carried out a herd immunity program, whether we like it or not. That seems to have been the thing. This eat out to whatever it was, help out as well. It was like when the biggest spike was, the confusion, the mixed messaging. There was no they didn't tell us what to do. They said, if you want, you can go out, or you can stay at home, or you can do what, do you know what I mean? It was like, stay at home, go to work, stay at home, don't go to the shop, wear a mask, don't wear a mask, I'm sorry, but they really, really did have a massive fault. And then throughout the whole thing, they used it as a way to siphon money off. When you look at the track and trace and all of these things, they've siphoned off all of this money. The only thing that actually worked was the vaccine rollout, and that was through the NHS, which is publicly owned.
Exactly.
Yes. So I mean, it's not confusion though. It's deliberate lies, and I have to use that word because at the point when Matt Hancock was going onto the TV and saying, we've got no evidence to suggest that, having the schools are safe and it's all fine, and there's no danger to opening them, etc., etc. And at the same time that he was coming out and saying that in public, he was being told by the Sage Group, behind the scenes, that schools were driving the pandemic. It was well known from studies in other countries, etc. So we were outright lied to. But it's not even just the stuff that directly relates to the pandemic. I was just going to say, if we look at the corruption thing, in the recent weeks, and Keir Starmer, declining to demand that Matt Hancock resign after being judged to be unlawful. The whole issues with Priti Patel, everything else, and then we had the joke last week of Keir Starmer demanding that the Tories release details of their funders and backers before the local election results to give voters a chance to see who's backing them. And yet we saw him in the leadership election refuse, maneuver in order to avoid releasing the details about who his backers were until he got voted in. And how can a Labour leader be effective when
yeah.
he's as bad as the Tories?
I personally think that actually we should just be focusing on the Tories right now, in the sense that they are actually in government. And I mean, let's not try to share the blame, in the sense that these people have been presiding over us for the last 11 years, stripping this country to its bone, letting the people down. And I think that that's where our attention should be focused on. We need to actually, well, and I hope you don't mind me mentioning it, Steve, the People's Assembly have called for a national demonstration on the 26th of June. And we're hoping that the whole country mobilises for that. And I think that one of the most important things, it will be the first time that it's been a year that we've all been separated from each other. And I think sometimes you can feel that you're not part of something because you've been isolated in a way. I think that's going to be a really important day, that we can show the strength and the size and the breadth of our movement. And when we all march together, I think that that's a really, really important thing to sort of say, guess what? And the theme of our demo is demand a new normal. We're not going to go back to this old way of working. We saw straight away, actually, when the pandemic hit, how fast did they take the homeless off the streets and put them into hotels? How we can pay people out of work. We can do all of this. It's a choice. It's a political decision that has to be made. And I think that what we have to do now is, as a society, as a movement, we have to move together, every single one of us in every group, and no matter where we're from, and we just have to put any disagreements or anything like that aside, and we have to move as one. Because one thing that the Tories do have, they have the money and they have the ear of the media, but we have the numbers in terms of people. And I think that we just have to gather together now and make each other feel confident that we have the power to change society. When you look at after the war, the NHS was the country was in an economic downturn, but we still managed to create the NHS and build social housing. Out of the ruins of a crisis, we can definitely demand a new normal. Sorry, I just wanted to express.
Yeah, that's fine. Miltos, what's your view on that, please?
I couldn't agree more. I think that, we need to stop relying on people who aren't really that interested or don't care that much, who are more interested in political squabbles than actually making our lives better. And we need to do it ourselves. We need to stop asking for permission to change society. And I think, yes, I do believe in activism and grassroots movements and direct action and community-based, the ability to go, you know what, I am not alone in this. And so showing that and organizing things like you're doing, Ramona, is so important. And it is what gives us hope when we feel there is no hope. And it is the thing that inspires us when we don't feel that inspired, or we feel like all we can do is just be angry. So I really appreciate that you are, instrumental in that kind of thing. So thank you. And we should all be on that.
Are you coming?
Demo. It's in June, isn't it? So yes, I will be. Yeah.
Assuming we're not all back in the thick of everything again, I guess. But I have a slightly different take because I.
God, Steve. Oh God.
I wholeheartedly support non-parliamentary and extra-parliamentary activity, because I think that's all we've got at the minute, really.
It is all we have.
But I think it's you can't turn a blind eye to the fact that essentially the one team has got both sides of the house at the moment. We need extra parliamentary activism, and we need people in Parliament who are prepared to stand up and fight and do what's necessary and drive the point home and demand that the narrative changes and not take no for an answer. And until we have that, then I think it's essential also to keep calling out calling out people like Keir Starmer who are failing to give that to the country at the time of desperate need. When
and
absolutely, are gagging for somebody to stand up and just say, this is how it is, and don't listen to what the BBC is telling you, and don't listen to what Boris Johnson's telling you, for God's sake. But here's what the reality is, and if you think I'm wrong, prove it. That would be, just manna from heaven at the moment in terms of.
Steve, all great things come from the streets, though, right? All great things.
Sorry, say that again.
All great things come from the streets. They come from protest. We don't.
Well, they do, and I think
we don't really make change until they're inside Parliament. For me personally, I'm an Irish woman. I moved over here 20 odd years ago. I'm not really into parliamentary politics. I was very much into street politics because I can see that protest works. And especially now with this whole thing with the policing bill as well, it's like, it's hugely important that we don't allow that to happen. But I look through history. Things happen outside of Parliament that you have to force these people into a position. So a lot of the time for me personally, I don't even take much notice, to tell you the truth. If we want something done, you have to do it yourself. That's if you want it done, do it yourself, and you have to do it on the streets, and then you push them into a position where it forces change. So
I kind of half agree. I think the issue is that the problem with using protest as the only main vehicle for change is that they tend to focus on a particular issue or set of issues at one time, and while those things are happening, the government in Parliament is busy sliding through as many other things as it can that are damaging the country while the rest of us are distracted. So you have to have your parliamentary representatives prepared to do their effing job, and we haven't, and therefore we don't it's like the issue with the unions where you've got one side trying to make out that it's Unite, for example, shouldn't be getting involved in parliamentary Westminster politics. It should be just doing workplace stuff. It's not either or. You do both, because if you don't do both, your enemy just goes through on the blind side and does whatever the hell he wants. So we have to do both. We've got to be out on the streets and stringing the nailing the parliamentary representatives to the wall until they actually agree to do their job, or get the hell out of the way and let some people come in and do it.
It's true, and I learned my lesson, in British politics in a way as well. It's like, I'm not voting for whatever. It's like, you hold your nose and do your vote. So yes, we support the parliamentary system to whatever extent, but I think that we also need to make sure that we are confident and strong enough to take to the streets and talk to your neighbours, talk to people, talk about politics on the streets, and not leave it up to that. I think it's a small. Parliamentary politics is such a small thing compared to what politics means in everybody's real lives.
Miltos, you looked about ready to come in on something there. What were you going to say?
I obviously agree with Ramona in the sense that we cannot wait for people to do the things that we need doing, right? I mean, this is not about we're asking for it. Inequality and the precariousness of most people's lives, housing, all of these things are only going to get worse. And either we have a solution or we don't. And at the moment, the system that we have is not going to be fit for purpose. And all that we're going to end up with is a two-tier society, if not three-tier society. But whatever it will be divided. So grassroots action is important because, of course, that's where we really see the bonds. We see that we are together. We can find like-minded people, and they motivate us, inspire us, and activate us to do stuff. So that is really important. But our actions have to influence Parliament. They have to, and they have to influence them in the most uncomfortable ways possible. And they cannot be us writing letters to MPs anymore, because that doesn't work. We are not in that world where MPs, once they get discovered some form of wrongdoing, they fall on their sword. That doesn't happen anymore. They've realized they can get away with stuff. So the only way that we can do it is putting so much pressure and making it so uncomfortable that they cannot ignore it. and yes, that's direct action, but it has to have some influence, because they are our legislators at the end of the day, and they can be influenced. And so I'm kind of drawing a very fine line between the two of you, where I do think that, that's why it's important to hold the leader of the opposition to account. In fact, sometimes even more so, because we know what the Tories are. We know what they are like. We have an ex-police commissioner saying that if it was up to him, he'd be spending 20% of his budget on policing and 80% of his budget on fighting inequality. And yet we have Priti Patel as Home Secretary. These things are not going to get better because of the Tories, but they might get better under a Labour government. So that's why it's important to hold Keir Starmer to account. It's really important to put pressure on him, because he can budge. And if he can't budge, he can put enough pressure on the PLP. Let's forget the PLP. The PLP has always been a complete disaster. The NEC to get rid of him. So that is where I see there's flux and movement. So yeah, don't stop attacking our leader of the opposition until he does things that make a difference, not just pandering to the establishment view of how we do things, because that is not going to work, and it's not going to make any of our circumstances better.
I'll just point out to people, we've got the link there going across the bottom at the moment for the People's Assembly event that Ramona was talking about in June. So do make note of those details either now or on catch up, and make sure to visit to register your attendance. My view on the Labour Party has always been that the worst possible Labour government will be better than the best possible Tory one. That doesn't mean that you should be offering people the worst possible Labour government. And especially not one that refuses to actually speak up and tell the Tory, tell people when the Tories are doing evil, as they often are. And if they're not, it really is that essential. If he's not prepared to do that job, he shouldn't be in the office that he's in, and he should get out of the way. And even the right wing are sharpening their nose for him, because they're not happy with with how he's performing. So the left has to be ready to hopefully spring that trap when the opportunity comes. And not hesitate about it, because the right certainly hasn't hesitated in terms of leveraging their power when they've had the opportunity to do it and do it ruthlessly. Now, I'd be doing everybody a disservice if we didn't look at a few of Miltos's tweets, and you might win see when we're looking. But I'll bring a few up on the screen.
Is this going to be embarrassing?
Well, it'll give people the chance to follow you, mate. That's my excuse. But I think it's all I did was do a search for. Okay. Some of your tweets mentioning the Tories and Johnson, and some of them mentioning Starmer and Corbyn, and I thought we'd take a little look, because I think there'll be quite a lot of people watching who will find it quite entertaining as well as anything else. So we have here, so this was you responding to at Helen Schlegel, if that's the right way to pronounce it, who had tweeted, "Why is Keir Starmer tougher on accusations of corruption in Liverpool than on actual corruption in Westminster? Because he's here to destroy any form of opposition to the Tories." That's a nice straight talking comment on that. Boris Johnson misleads Parliament nearly every week. The MF, this was Boris Johnson subject to the same scrutiny that Nicola Sturgeon is for misleading Parliament. He would have had to resign after his first week in office. I don't think there's much argument on that. Sadly, at the moment, with the way the current Tory government behaves, misdeeds are a prerequisite to promotion, seemingly. But we have seen Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer was prepared to say that he thought that Nicola Sturgeon should resign. He's been prepared to speak out about a lot of people, as long as they're not on the Tory side of the house. Where are we? Yeah, so here we are again. This is a nice riposte to right-wing MP Ben Bradshaw, who's been having a go at some of the left unions recently. But he was commenting on this, when Keir Starmer was fighting against the idea of a tax rise on the hugely wealthy people and hugely wealthy corporations. And Ben Bradshaw leapt to his defence, saying, 3 Labour MPs calling for tax increases as we emerge from the worst economic hit for 300 years. didn't bother turning up to make their case at last night's PLP. Well, why wouldn't you turn up to a bunch of people who are generally very abusive to anybody who dares to disagree with them, as we saw in the case with Jeremy Corbyn? So you tweeted, some people prefer to kiss ass and then work towards a better future for everyone, than work towards a better future, excuse me. Good luck winning the argument when the Tories will be fighting you from the left at the next election, idiot. Don't hold back, Miltos, tell it like it is.
All I've got to say about that is that we will get free broadband for all under the Tories before we will under Keir Starmer. That is terrible.
Well, yeah, I mean, we saw the so-called centrists in reality, right wingers in the Labour Party who shouldn't be there, denouncing the idea as being, just plain silly. And now suddenly, the Tories are proposing that as a real thing. We saw similar in terms of, Boris Johnson, as soon as it politically suited him and the need was there in the country for, that they were prepared to acknowledge for big spending, suddenly he was, throwing money at things and discovering whole magic money forests, never mind a magic money tree that they were always going on about. Another one here, I have no word for the Tories, but even less the Labour Party, because they should be better than this. Disillusionment complete. And I think that, that is pretty accurate. Obviously some of those came up with Labour, even though that was the search for the Tories, which just shows how closely aligned they are, sadly. And here's some of your recent comments on Keir Starmer and his Labour Party, which is Keir Starmer's only interested in bullshit politics, which plays well in the Daily Mail. And this was the Good Law Project, which is not a particularly left-wing thing, as I understand it, filling the vacuum caused by a woeful lack of opposition. Why the silence, Keir Starmer? And, I've seen quite a lot of, somebody quote tweeted me today that I forget, it was one of these comedians who generally is not a fan, but said, he's not a fan of the Skwawk box, but, what the hell is Keir Starmer for? And he's one of these centrists that didn't like Jeremy Corbyn, and yet even he can't see the point of this. And I mean, I'm not going to read this one verbatim, but I am so effing tired of this. Corbyn is
sorry. I get
public enemy number one. But the only C's I see are the ones who've always been running things. I mean, that's where we are pretty much, isn't it? And I appreciate personally very much, Miltos, that you've been prepared to speak out as bluntly and with no holds barred as that, and I suspect that lots of people watching will be as well. Everybody's stunned into silence now.
Look, I just
sorry to follow that on.
Very well. I just feel things very passionately. It's okay. I just feel things very passionately, and I don't believe, life is short, and I get very frustrated when it feels so easy to dismantle a person's reputation, and so it's easy to I just think that I had a really strong sense that I was willing to get behind Keir Starmer, even though I didn't vote for him. I absolutely was willing to hear him out. I believe that I didn't really believe him, but I did believe that I'm willing to if this is the person that's going to hang on to the things that have obviously, and it's quite clear that obviously we've moved the discussion and the conversation about what we need for the future. We've already done that. That is, for whatever else we feel we didn't achieve under the Corbyn project, that is something that is indelible. And we must always hang on to that and always remember. And that is why we do what we do, and we say what we say, and we believe what we believe, and we fight for the things we believe. What I find so upsetting is how we are the ones that are the problem. When people criticize the way we talk about Keir Starmer, but times are too tough and the situation is too important. Remember that even after we've dealt with this pandemic, we've got climate catastrophe literally knocking on the door. So we there is no We don't have the luxury of time to deal with things, because we have to deal with it now. And everything is connected. You know, there is a reason why, you know, people who are worried about immigration, you know, climate catastrophe is only going to make things worse. So we need to deal with these things and deal with them in a grown-up, forward-thinking, future-thinking way. And be honest with people and explain things, and don't just pander to the lowest common denominator. I mean, the problem is that our press literally controls the narrative, and that is a real problem. And that's why it's really important people like you, Steve, and you know, small organizations. I'm not calling you small by any way, by any means, but organizations, we need to fund them, we need to support them, we need to amplify them, because they are the people that are going to make a difference, because we are saturated by nonsense.
Amen to that. So I'll give you one last chance, the last couple of minutes, Ramona, to give us the date and what's going on with your demonstration then in June.
Yeah, well, as I said before, I think that, you know, the 21st of June, all restrictions lift. So we have to look at that date, the 26th of June, through a lens of what the world looks like then, not now. We have local groups up and down the country. They're putting coaches on it. Within the next couple of days, we're going to have a page on our website for local transport. I think it's incredibly important that we get on the streets on the 26th of June to demand the new normal, to take this fight to the Tories and say, we're not going back to that old place where we came from, where it's incredibly difficult for people to survive this world. You know, we have to look out for each other. We have to move together as one and say, we're done. We've had enough. We expect and we demand different, better homes, our health, our jobs, our education. We want that rectified, and we want to rectify it immediately. So that's why it's very, very important that we all meet 12 noon, Portland Place outside the BBC, and then we're going to march to Parliament.
So the link's there below on the scrolling banner that's going through. I'm going to bring it to a close because I want to just give a quick plug for if people can hang around for another 15 minutes or just over. 8:15, we have the Hartlepool by-election hustings between what should be the independent but essentially Northern Independence Party candidate Thelma Walker and Labour candidate Paul Williams. However, it's likely to be Labour candidate Paul Williams' empty chair taking part in the debate because he hasn't fronted up yet to actually appear and answer some questions. So unless he has a last-minute U-turn, that could be an interesting event. But
Wow.
Do join us then back again on Socialist Telly in 15 minutes. And thank you ever so much, guys, for joining. You've been absolutely fantastic, and I've had a blast doing it as well. Take care, everybody, and have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.